Death is the unyielding truth that binds us all, an inevitable, profound, and deeply intimate encounter with the finite nature of life. It arrives without warning, shattering the world we thought we knew. In its wake, grief emerges, often dismissed as something to fix or get over. But what if grief, in its suffocating pain, is not a burden to carry or something from which we need to move on? What if grief is instead a sacred invitation, an opening to feel more deeply, to connect in unimaginable ways, and to transform all that we knew to be true? I'm Laura Walton, and I'm so grateful you're here. Together, let's step into the uncharted terrain of death and grief, not as something to fear or avoid, but as a force that shapes us, breaks us, and ultimately remakes us. Let's meet it not with resistance, but with curiosity and courage. And let's do this on purpose. Welcome back to Grief on Purpose, the podcast. I am here with a special guest today, Jacob Tobia. Jacob, thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be here with you.
I'm so excited. So I don't know you. I reached out via cold email to try to connect with you and have this conversation. So I really appreciate your taking the time to do this. Can you share just a little bit about who you are and what your work is?
Yeah, so I am an author first and foremost. My first book, Sissy, was a memoir kind of about my own coming of gender story, right? Like how I came into my own identity as a non-binary person, kind of the comedic ups and downs of that journey. And really the goal of that book was trying to tell a story of coming into one's sort of transness that showed what a kind of experience outside of the binary can look like, and also what a slightly less linear journey can be, right? Because not everyone's gender sort of journey within the trans spectrum is a point A to point B story, right?
Yeah.
And then my second book now is called Before They Were Men, Essays on Manhood, Compassion, and What Went Wrong. It's coming out August 26th, so you should go buy it. But it's one of those interesting moments of my like sort of my work guiding me, right? Like I wasn't sure if I was going to write another book, first off, and I certainly didn't anticipate that my second book would be a kind of like feminist essay collection tome about finding a way to course correct on how we're talking about men and boys and masculinity writ large in our culture. And I certainly didn't realize that I would be doing it against the backdrop of like, kind of fascist collapse in America that is driven by a bunch of broken boys and men taking it out on the rest of us. So it's been a really interesting journey where, my own experience processing my gender and finding freedom from the traditional strictures of masculinity, like, and sort of fleeing that army of men that I was conscripted into. Um, it's been in my own journey of figuring out how to turn back around and look back toward young men and boys who I think are very lost right now and say,
Mhm.
hey, I got out and you might be able to too, right? There are ways
Mhm.
you can escape, and your escape might look a little different than mine, right? Like you may not be non-binary on the other side, although I would argue everyone's a little non-binary, but I think there's freedom for you to find. And that dovetails so directly with grief for me because of so many reasons. But first, because, one of my most transformative experiences of my life when it comes to having love for a man and watching him have to contend with some of what he was taught about who he could be and who he couldn't be was the process of helping my father die. And also in the process of grieving my father's death, noticing the gender disparity in grief
Mhm.
was wild. It's one of the things that compelled me to ultimately be like, I got to write this book because
Yeah.
I went to my grief support group at the hospice where my father died, and I was the only person like who was assigned male. There wasn't even a man in the group, right? Like I was the only male assigned person in the room, and I'm basically a girl who's just really hairy and lazy. So, like it was why I was like, where are the men and boys, and what are they doing with all their grief? Like,
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's such a big question. Yeah, so this, I feel like this is already a lot right here. I'd love to
Right,
hear
LOL, you're
more.
like intro yourself, and I'm like, cool, let me go for 5 minutes and
No,
just like lay out
no,
some existential shit.
no, it's perfect. It's perfect. So, yeah, I mean, wherever we want to start, you can start, but I'd love to hear more about your dad and what that experience was for you, and then how that evolved into what the grief looked like for you.
Yeah. So my father died from complications from a cycling accident. So like a bicycle.
Okay.
He was an avid cyclist. And one day, I think back in 2018, I think it was, he wasn't hit by a car, but he was kind of run off to the extreme shoulder of the road by a car trying to pass him. And, his front wheel hit a pothole or hit like a gap in the pavement and
Mm.
stopped completely and threw him over his handlebars. And he essentially face planted into the asphalt. And his helmet protected him somewhat, but like he had suffered quite a lot of injuries kind of across his face. And the broken bones within his face healed, the soft tissues healed, but his nervous system, like the nerves within his face, never quite got it back. And so he ended up with a case of I'm trying to remember I know the I know the syndrome, but I'm trying to remember the adjective here. Atypical trigeminal neuralgia, but because it was trauma inflicted, right? It was a result
Mm.
of trauma to the nerves. And trigeminal neuralgia is one of the most painful neurological disorders, like in humanity. It's not that well known. It's a fairly rare disease, thank God. But it basically just means that the trigeminal nerve in your face, which is one of the most sensitive nerves in your body, right? Like you can feel wind on your face before you can feel it almost anywhere else, right?
Oh, okay.
Like your face is incredibly sensitive. Like your face will hurt with the cold before anything else will,
Mhm.
right? It's because your trigeminal nerve is really sensitive. And so he developed a pain disorder where he'd get phantom pain in his trigeminal nerve, and it got worse and worse and worse to the point that, I mean, like, his quote unquote medication, which wasn't really medication, was like, using fentanyl lollipops that are like reserved for terminal cancer patients, right?
Mhm.
So he was having attacks of phantom pain after a number of failed brain surgeries and neurological operations that were so bad, like he couldn't breathe. He would aspirate on his own spit. It was really traumatic and a really difficult time for our family and for him. And it was compounded by the fact that he was dying in the state of North Carolina, where there's not a death with dignity available for terminally ill people. And even if there were, he probably would not, it would have been very difficult to get him classed as dying because neurologists refuse to name that pain is terminal often, right? That like medically speaking, pain will never kill you officially. It'll always be something else, right? It can be a result of the pain, but pain itself doesn't actually shut down your body and bring on death. So we ended up in this really complicated situation where he needed to die and had no legal option and ultimately had to overdose. And then didn't quite die from that and landed in hospice, where he was then allowed like an actual dignified death, where they weren't worried about whether or not the pain management was going to kill him because he was already in the process of dying at that point.
Mhm.
So it was a really, really complicated death. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to go through. And the grieving on the other side of it was monumental in so much as I had to grieve in the way that people who lose loved ones to rare diseases or particularly painful or suffering based diseases often have to grieve, right? You're where you've actually known they were going to die for a very long time. So you've done some pre-grieving. You've done almost all of it, right? Like you are prepared for their death for months. You have accepted that they are not going to be in your life for months in advance. But then you have to, on the back end, accept the terms on which they died. And you have to accept the pain that was part of their life. And you have to accept the suffering and the failures of the medical system that allow such suffering. And so, it's really it was an incredibly galvanic experience for me. I mean, it really it changed the trajectory of my life in so much as I saw how others around me were averse to death and to dying, and how their aversion to looking death in the face directly led to intense suffering and loneliness and isolation for my father.
From your father specifically.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
right? That like, I mean, yeah, that like he needed to talk about the fact that he was dying. He
Mhm.
needed to talk about the fact that he had to figure out how to end his life, right? He needed to talk about the injustice of living in a world that wouldn't allow him to. And it was not a conversation that almost anyone in his life, other than me, was capable of holding alongside him.
Oh.
And so I think when I think about why grieving is so important, I mean, there's so much to say about how most violence in the world is just untouched grief, right? I think that men are more violent because they do not grieve, because they are not given social permission to grieve, because we do
Mhm.
not glorify the grieving of men, because we do not celebrate men as they grieve, because we celebrate men when they do not grieve. I swear to God, if I have to see another movie where a man doesn't cry at a funeral and is celebrated as being strong, I'm going to burn down movie theaters. Like I'm going to start doing arson. I'm going to burn down a movie studio. Like I swear to God, if we can't change that, like
Yeah.
because it is such a the one to one of people who cannot grieve, who have been taught that they are not allowed to grieve, who have been taught that feeling their emotions is in and of itself a failure of their identity, right? That turning into despicable, unconscionable violence in the world is that then they are blamed for, right? Which is the other part that's crazy to me, is it's so one to one and it's so obvious to me and it's wild to me that other people can't see it. But yeah, if I have to think about, it's funny because the thing that's obnoxious about writing a book is that you type, and then they cut down a bunch of trees, and then they print it on those dead trees. And then you sit down for a podcast interview and you think, well, fuck, this is a whole other essay I should have fucking written. And now I don't can't put it in there because they already cut down all the
It's
trees and
too
already
late.
printed all the stupid fucking things.
Oh.
Like shit. Because I'm like, yeah, it's in sort of the architecture of the book, but this idea of like, yeah, if what would a world look like where men grieved?
Mhm.
What would a
Mhm.
world look like where our construct of masculinity included grieving beautifully and profoundly and poignantly and with your whole heart?
Yeah.
I don't even know what that world could look like. It feels almost unimaginable because it would be so beautiful and would be so much more wonderful to live in.
Yeah. It feels so different from the one that we live in.
Yeah,
I have very similar views on grief from what you just said, as far as that, I've definitely thought about that being as the root of all of our problems
right.
in a lot of ways. And yeah, just how much we're taught, specifically men taught not to feel that or not to show that is a
Yeah.
huge problem.
And
So,
also none of that, just because I think it's important to say, none of that discounts the ways in which like women are also instructed not to grieve, right? I am
yes,
not saying that it is perfect on the other side of the aisle here.
right, 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 right.
It is complicated for everybody, right? Like grief is never easy. And we don't have to make it a comparative thing, but I think that drawing attention to the lack of social scripts for men to grieve and the lack of vessels with which and spaces in which men are able to grieve. I think the reason I emphasize it is because of the proximate and immediate violence that I think it leads to in our world.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I see that. Had you been curious about grief prior to your dad's death?
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
just because like I mean I've always had a little bit of a taste for the macabre, right? Like I've always been, fascinated by the bigger questions and all that kind of stuff. And remember being really grateful as I was growing up because I grew up in the Methodist church where I still go to church service once in a blue moon. We have Pride Sunday now at my church,
Mhm.
my childhood church. So I like, in North Carolina, the history is fantastic. The life is long and the arc of the moral universe sometimes does bend toward justice. And we got to at least celebrate it when you get to see it. But like, I'm not as, I don't practice really as much as I used to. But one thing that was really cool about growing up in the Methodist church is that it did provide a space where feeling my grief was celebrated, right? Like I remember one of my friends from youth group, Greg, he died while we were, I think he was maybe in like ninth grade or something, maybe eighth grade. And I remember being really grateful because the church gave me a place to grieve because we had
Mhm.
ritual around it and because thinking about like and because talking about him and talking about what the loss meant for us as a group and making space to do that and, crying as we played the songs that we played to honor him and remember him, like that was encouraged, you
Mm,
know? It was it was not there was no need to be strong in that moment. There was no need to pretend that you weren't hurting, that you
mm.
didn't miss him. So, and I'd honestly never put that together until this conversation. I love coming on podcasts. It's so good for my brain.
Oh.
Thank you, listeners, for getting my ass here to fucking think about some things for once. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in a tradition that really gave me space for grief and gave me space to think about it. And also was like one of those like weird punk kids in high school who would go go have picnics in cemeteries because I think they're pretty. And I still do that shit, right? Like when I need to write music, I go to a cemetery because A, I think it's so sad that no one visits, right? Like people barely ever visit. I almost never see somebody else at the cemetery. And I think that probably all those people, if that is where their spirits are, they are very lonely and they need some company. And I think they'd be very happy that this homosexual with a ukulele is sitting there plucking, right? Like I think they'd be like, finally, some good company, right? Like if they're there at all. And also because they're beautiful spaces. They're beautiful
Yeah.
spaces. They're
Yeah.
beautiful. So yeah, I thought about grief a lot before my father's death, but certainly my experience became far more intimate with it
Yeah.
after.
Yeah. Was that confusing though? Like growing up in the Methodist church that it sounds like supported your grief and supported rituals around that, but also I know a lot of the other world
Yeah.
doesn't. Was that confusing?
It wasn't confusing for me, but that is because I am cut from a particularly stubborn and confident cloth. So when I would receive all the messages about what it meant to be a quote unquote good man and like what I was supposed to do to be a boy and whatever. And I always was just kind of like, yeah, that's bullshit. I'm gonna do what I need to survive, but this is all horse shit. Like this is stupid as fuck. Like I have no interest in any of this, and that's clearly bad for me. So I'm not ingesting any of it. You can put it on my plate and I will feed it to the dog.
Mhm.
Like it's that kind of energy for me. So I never deeply internalized the whole don't feel thing, right?
Okay.
Like I was just like, And I actively sought out any space in my life where I could feel and people would let me feel and I didn't have to pretend that I didn't. So,
Okay.
theater was a godsend, right? Because I could feel real, real, real big and everyone was like, yeah, that's your job. You're on stage. You got to feel the shit, right? I did music and chorus and singing because you could feel all you wanted to feel while you were singing and no one had to know what you were feeling, right? So the arts were a huge refuge for me in my adolescence in that regard. And spirituality and faith community were also a place because the rules were different, right? It's part of why I think it was, for some people, it was viewed as like a little bit girly to, go to church a bunch and stuff. Like, oh, all that touchy-feely Jesus crap, right? Like that
Yeah.
sort of energy that I think some of the more emotionally shut down young men in my life projected at it. But once I was there, it was like, no, 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 you're supposed to think about the big things. You're supposed to feel the big feelings. You are supposed to engage with the bigger and deeper questions. And of course, some weird shit came along with that because, evangelical Christianity can be strange and not always great for people. But there were some cool things within that foundation, and as a human being, I refuse to throw out that wonderful cherubic little baby with all that bathwater, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, what was your relationship with your dad like?
It was long and tumultuous, and it landed so well. Like, it was such a head trip for my father to accept having not only a gay child, but a precocious activist, loud, in your face, I'm gonna make a big part of my life about fighting for my right to be this way child who then, goes like senior year of high school, starts buying high heels and comes back from freshman year of college wearing lipstick to dinner and, like starts wearing dresses by junior year. And then by senior year is wearing a really slutty Jackie Kennedy type number from Goodwill, like to graduation from Duke, right? Like as if that's a school where like people expect that image in 2014, right? Like it was I mean, part of it was just that the speed at which I evolved as a person was so fast, I mean, the poor dude just had whiplash for years, right? Like,
Yeah.
especially because I really look like my dad. I am just my dad, but with the height of my mom's side of the family. Like, I am my father, 3 inches taller. And
Mm.
so when he's looking at me in lipstick, he's looking at a damn mirror and being like, this is so strange and uncanny for me, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so, there were definitely moments where he had some pretty intense phobic reactions to who I was. There were moments of rejection. There were moments where he said some dumb shit. There were moments where he said some mean shit, right? But he really came around, and it was a testament to the fact that we just wouldn't give up on each other, even when we weren't getting along. And and it was a testament to my patience, I think. I gave him so much grace, and I got grace back, right? And it was also a testament to like just the depth of my dad's love for me, frankly.
Mhm.
I mean, my dad just loved me fiercely, and he loved me even when he was confused as shit about what the fuck his queer ass faggy child was doing, right?
Mm.
Like even when he didn't get it, he still tried to love me as he huffed and puffed, you know?
Mhm.
And then at a certain point, he just was like, well, I guess this is what it is. And that's one of the things I do write about in this book was that a thing that brought my dad and I really close together in this way that I wasn't anticipating was reality television.
Mm.
Documentary television is probably the more accurate thing to call it because I feel like documentary TV and reality TV are really different beasts. But the show True Life on MTV, I don't know
Mm.
if you've heard of that, but like
I
for
haven't.
some 90s kids, it was iconic. It was like it's a
Mm.
documentary series on MTV and they'd be like, True Life, I'm fat, or like True Life, I have like I'm living with a mental health issue, or like True Life, I have too much body hair, right? Like it would just be like documentary television about people who were
Uh,
living interesting lives and dealing with something.
I think I
Um,
do remember. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and like
Yeah.
sometimes, and honestly, the way it was told, like
Mm.
it was a little bit of a spectacle of people being different, but also it was
Mhm.
generally told with quite a bit of heart and a lot of compassion. And I remember being quite transformed
Mhm.
by a lot of those episodes. And lo and behold, in 2015, I was living in New York, and a producer was like, "We want to put you in an episode of True Life. I'm genderqueer," and I
Mm.
said, "Okay." And there's this beautiful thing that happens when you're going to be on national television and your family is going to be talked about either way, where they have to choose, am I going to participate in how I'm represented, or am I going to be talked about and not show up?
Mm.
And my dad chose, he was like, he didn't want to, but he was like, fine, I'll participate because if I don't participate, it's going to be worse, right?
Yeah.
Like if your dad refuses to appear on camera, then he's going to be talked about, but won't be able to speak himself. And so he sat down with the producers for an interview, which like I was like, oh God, like okay, and of
Mhm.
course I didn't get to watch it. Like I didn't watch it as it was happening, but later I was told by the producers, like I think they sent maybe they didn't send me some of the footage, but there was some stuff that was cut into the episode where my dad said things to them that he had just never said out loud to me
Mm.
because that's often how parents are. Like, when you have the neighbors over for dinner and then all of a sudden like your mom or dad is telling some story about their life in college that you've never heard a day in your life that's like a really cool story and you're like, "What? You went backpacking in Nova Scotia when you were 23 and you hitchhiked all the way to fucking like British Columbia? What?" Right? Like, it's like there's all kinds of things you learn.
Yeah.
And so it was that kind of moment where my dad, I think, he like opened up in a way that he'd never opened up to me and just said what was true, which is that having a kid, because he was scared for me all the time because I was living in New York City and running around in dresses and he was worried I was going to get attacked,
Yeah.
which is a really fair thing to worry about for your gender nonconforming, visibly trans kid.
Yeah.
It's a totally fair anxiety. It was one I held for myself.
Mhm.
I talk about that in Before They Were Men in the context of a essay called Cat Calls, where the whole sort of point of the essay is like that finding empathy for men who have hurt us is not something we must do in order to be good people or good feminists, because the imperative to be good or well behaved or that we must be kinder than them, like I can't with that discourse. But finding empathy for the people who've hurt you is, as obnoxious as this is, truly the only way you're going to find freedom. It's the only way you get your power back. And when I was living in New York, the men who catcalled me made my life a living hell, and I was scared all of the time. And it stopped being fun to be who I was. I stopped enjoying my own clothes. I stopped enjoying my own body. I started feeling really scared in the street. I started not my gender freedom kind of went away. And I hated those men for so long. And then my dad said that on national television that he was
Mm.
scared for me. And then all of a sudden, this thing clicked where I was like, oh my God, maybe the same assumption I made about my dad that like he hated this part of me, when in fact, this part of me scared him.
Mhm.
Maybe they're deep, deep down, that's what's true for these men who are catcalling me too, that actually what's happening is that they're seeing me live with this freedom and they are reminded of the fact that they couldn't cry when their grandma died, or they had a part of themselves that they might have literally had beaten out of them, or they had to give up in order to survive, or they watch someone they love be really hurt because they defied gender norms. And now I'm reminding them of that, right? That like this is likely not about them hating me so much as them about me reminding them of something that the world did to them that they hate. And they
Mhm.
are too mixed up in their own heart and have not been able or been given permission to heal or grieve, such that they take it out on me because it's
Yeah.
easier to take it out on me than it is to feel the pain.
Yes.
Which brings us right back full circle to how
Hmm.
it's like we are living in this world right now and in this moment in feminist discourse where I think we've lost the thread, where we are looking at violent men and we decry them and we proclaim how bad they are. And I think we lose sight of the fact that they are people who have had their personhood ruthlessly taken away from them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it sucks to think about that. It sucks to acknowledge that Donald Trump is really, 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 really sad.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
dude has had a
There's,
miserable life.
yeah, there's a lot of pain under that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That like there is something deeply, deeply, there is some grieving that JD Vance needs to do. There is some deep healing that he needs to do. And instead, he's decided to take it out on all of us via the US government and by wrecking the world. And yes, we can hold anger around that, but it is far more liberating and powerful for us to hold pity and empathy around that because it does actually take away their power.
Mhm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. See, I think being able to see that pain, that potential for pain in another person,
Yeah.
and yeah, have that empathy for that as another human, what that would be like to be in that amount of pain, that changes the whole game for the one who's doing that.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
and part of it is just that it's really easy. I mean, their propaganda is so good, right? Like their
Mhm.
PR is so
Yeah.
good, you know? The boys on the golf course are really good at convincing you that they're having a better time than you are.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
did you get to cry at your dad's funeral?
Yeah.
Did you get to sob when when your mom was sick? When's
Yeah.
the last time you've been able to cry? When's the last time you've been able to feel your grief? Because I don't care how expensive your country club membership is, you're not having a better life than me if you haven't been able to grieve any of the losses that have happened in your life.
Mhm.
You're
Yeah.
having a way worse time than me. And
Yes.
bought a lot of expensive cars to try to compensate and heal a wound that will only ever be healed by a good cry and by seeing that little boy in the mirror who you said couldn't feel anything and holding him tight and telling him that, your inner child, that like that that they deserve to exist or whatever.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Not to
Yes.
get heady.
No, 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 but no, that's great. Was that, it sounds like that became, that was very clear to you once you found your way into the grief support groups.
Mhm.
That was kind of obvious. Was that a consideration you had given much thought to prior to that?
No, I was surprised that
Mhm.
there were just I was because I was in it was just the support group was just it wasn't like young women who lost their parents, right? It was a grief support group for people who were on the younger side who had had their parent die at this hospice facility sometime in the last
Mhm.
year,
Yeah.
right? It was voluntary, you had to sign up, and just not a single person who identified as a man signed up.
Hmm.
And I remember being like, I mean, it was a beautiful group and it was so good for me. Holy shit, it was good for me. Yeah, shout out to Transitions. really amazing hospice organization in North Carolina. They are fantastic. Their social workers are so good. Their therapists are really amazing. I am very grateful for them. But like, yeah, I remember just sort of feeling so sad and surprised that there wasn't a single man there.
Mhm.
And I think it was when I think about sort of all the things, all the sort of dominoes that fell, that had to fall in order for me to finally acknowledge like the a truth that was hard for me to say, and that is kind of the underpinning of this entire book, which is that I would argue, spiritually speaking, that men are the ones suffering the most under the gender binary right now, like because they have the least tools, because they don't even acknowledge their own suffering, because they can't hear about gender without shutting down, right?
Mhm.
Like that tells you something. I'm not saying that everyone suffers, this is a fact, but I think men are suffering more deeply and more darkly than we can really fathom. And the public health statistics around that
Mhm.
really bring that to the fore. But like, yeah, I think it was one of the, there were a few straws that broke the camel's back, but it was really one of them. And it's just so funny because as I'm talking to you, it's like, of course, that was a light bulb moment for me. And that's one of the key things that made me write this book. And yet I didn't even mention it because I forgot, because like it just didn't. For some reason, it didn't come up. And so I'm really
Mhm.
grateful for this conversation for reminding me of that. And also because I'm like, damn, that's a good op-ed. Let me pitch that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
ooh, that's an essay. So I get that's an essay. That's a promo essay for the book. I could get someone to publish. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. That's great. So how long were you involved in the grief support group?
Let's see. I think we met for it was like 9 or 10 sessions, and it was once a week. And oh my God, it was so fabulous. I tell everyone who's gone through a loss, I'm like, you got to get you a grief support group. And the reason you got to get you a grief support group is not because, oh, you need a support group because you have a unique need. It's no, 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 no. It's because a container is everything.
Yeah.
Just having a place to put it all because it's
Hmm.
everywhere. And when you're in it, it like having a place where I would be like, I had a thought and I could write it down and I'd be like, I'm going to talk about that in a group.
Hmm.
Right. And I knew when I was going to get to talk about it, and I knew when I was going to get to go through it. And it was okay to punt it a little bit down the road so I could live my life day to day, but
Hmm.
not because I wasn't going to process it, but because
Right.
I had scheduled processing time with a bunch of other people. You know, and also because I just needed to fucking cry at a bunch of people as many times as I needed to. And I wasn't sure how many times that was going to be. But like, I needed to cry at people who were like, thank God I needed to cry too.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. How did you know when you were quote unquote done with the grief support group?
Well, it ran for 10 sessions and then it was finished, right?
Oh,
Like
okay.
that's
So
how
it's
it was
very
a
okay.
batched kind of thing. And that's part of it is because it was free and it was like, they had like a licensed counselor and therapist who they were paying. And so it's a service they offer.
Okay.
If I wanted to go to another one, I think I probably could have signed up for another one.
Hmm.
But I did feel like I got something really wonderful out of it.
Hmm.
And had relationships with people from the group where if I needed to stay in touch, I could have. And I did a little bit.
Okay.
And also by then had really established who my grief people were outside of the group, you know, and had been brought together with other folks who were really thinking about this. So had enough other space for it. And part of knowing that you've maybe gotten what you needed out of a grief support group is the moment when you know that your grief is never over and you are at peace with the fact that your grief is never over.
That's good. I like
Yeah. Yeah.
that.
Once you know that, like you might be okay to not go to a
Hmm.
group every week.
Hmm. Oh,
Although even then you may not. And honestly, I got to a point where I was able to acknowledge that my grief was so beautiful and
mm,
was kind of like I still, when I have moments, it's once in a blue moon, something will just land and I will just ugly cry for my dad. And in those moments, they are no longer bitter. Like they are bittersweet
yeah.
because
Yes.
missing
Yeah.
him acutely, missing him so deep, like I will be really, really sad if by the time I'm 80, I don't cry for him anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm like, no, I need to once in a blue moon, not every day. Every
Hmm.
day would be a little too much. But
Hmm.
like in the moments when it makes sense, like, I'm going to grad school in ostensibly 3 weeks. Holy shit. I am not prepared, whatever. But like, I'm going to grad school soon. And the process of applying to grad school and getting accepted places, like, I just thought about graduation and how he won't be there and how my dad, like, education was his whole
Yes.
thing. He's a first generation American, right? Like, and grew up with immigrant parents, right? He does the whole, like, he wanted me to get a master's so bad. He
Mhm.
never pressured me, but he wanted it, right? And just thinking about like, oh my God, one of the hardest things about accepting going to school is that it means I have to have a graduation or he's not going to be there.
Yeah.
And I just burst into tears. And I was just like, oh, thank God,
hmm
you
Yes.
know?
Yeah. And that's how the grief, as you know, continues to evolve, and it's never over because there's always going to be things throughout your life. There's always going to be things like that you do
Yeah.
that he's not there for.
Yeah.
And that will be sad and other things.
And also like, it's not never over in a like boom, boom, boom kind of way. Like it's never over in a, well, yeah, my love for that person never dies.
Yes. hmm
So how could the grief totally go away too?
Right. Right. Yeah. How was, as it relates to your grief, how was the experience of writing this most recent book?
I mean, I really do love being like that weird girl with the clip-on earrings crying in the Starbucks. I do love it. I'm like, I've gotten used to it for a while. There was a period of time where I was like, oh God, is this awkward? And then I got to this point where I was just like, no, this is fine. It's okay. Like this is like people can tell that something cool is happening, I think. And like, because it's not, there's a difference between if I were like on the phone and crying, it's, oh shit, is that person in crisis? But I feel like if you're like typing and crying,
Mhm.
it's kind of like, I assume I'm like, oh, you're just like something really amazing is
You're
happening on
doing
that
something
fucking
great over
screen.
there.
Something
Yeah.
really fucking cool's on that goddamn screen. Can I see it? So, I think there were definitely moments like it was challenging, I'm not gonna lie, and it required digging really deeply. And if this book does not land in the world in the way that it deserves to, part of my fury will be that I rendered my grief so publicly and so vulnerably, and I'm like, excuse me, like people don't just do that, right?
Yeah.
It also creates a big disconnect with your publisher and with everyone else because like your publisher wants to just kind of relate to it professionally, and I'm like, babe, you can't anymore. Like, I'm sorry. Like, work on shallower books if you want your authors to not have strong emotions about whether or not the New Yorker Radio Hour is booking them. And yes, I did cry because the New Yorker Radio Hour wouldn't book me, right? And did have a breakdown this week because that didn't happen, but it's because it feels like a rebuke of so much more than just it's not just a rebuke of like me professionally. It feels like a rebuke of me professionally, but it also feels like a rebuke of my theory of change, right?
Yeah.
In a moment when feminist discourse is just foundering. I mean, it's just on the floor with our inefficacy, right? Like, and a moment where men and boys are in so much pain and it is getting worse and worse every day, and the vice is tightening and tightening, and all of them are becoming fascists because of it. And like, how dare you read about read like such a beautifully rendered story about my father
hmm
and not be moved to want to talk to me.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I am true. There's this Zora Neale Hurston quote, and I have to look it up to make sure that I get it word perfect. But like it's my favorite quote ever. I need to get it tattooed on my arm literally for convenience because I'm always looking it up and like and it's stupid. At a certain point, it's you need to not just Google this, you just need to be able to read it off of your forearm. But there's this quote from her. She says, "Sometimes I feel discriminated against, but it does not make me angry. It merely astonishes me. How can any deny themselves the pleasure of my company? It's beyond me."
Oh.
And in moments, I'm like, how can anyone deny like the beauty of my grief and what it means to sit with it? Like,
hmm
it's beyond me, right? Like, how can any deny themselves the pleasure of my company? I don't get it, right? Who else are you talking to? Some dry ass academic who's not going to do shit, right? Like,
Yes.
everybody out here having those boring conversations in the world about like where we are with trans rights and what's going on with American men and boys. And like, they're doing it in such a dry, academic, like rich people talking about how to govern the poor's kind of way. And I'm just like, at a certain point, you got to break through that tone, friend,
hmm
because people are hurting. And if you don't feel like, if it doesn't feel like you're experiencing emotion when talking about their visceral pain, you look kind of like a weird plutocratic, like bureaucratic sort of like academician who's thinking about them but not with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that quote. Thank you for finding that and sharing it.
It's my favorite.
Yeah, it's a good one. Can I see the cover of your book?
Yes. Okay. So it's funny because so this is the early copy. So, and I think it's very serious because the book's very serious.
Mhm.
I like it also because like men is stamped all across it really uniformly, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
and stamped even on top of the letters itself, like of the
Yeah.
title.
Yeah.
But the fun thing is we actually had a misprint, and I don't have a copy because the actual physical copies haven't arrived from my author copies haven't arrived at my house yet. But there was a printing issue with because pigments render differently in different inks, and
Uh,
somehow all thousands of the cover, like for the book jacket, were printed before someone realized that the reddish sort of color came out pink. So
mm,
now men is in pink, basically. I mean, it's a red-ish pink, but it definitely leans more fuchsia. And so that's what the book looks like now. And I was just like, well, sometimes the universe tells you that you didn't make the right design choice and that this book
uh-huh.
needed to look a little more like that.
So you're going with the fuchsia?
Well, I mean, I don't really have a choice because it was like, well, if you don't go with the fuchsia, we have to move back the publication date
Oh,
because
okay.
the shipping schedule is very tight. And I said, you know what? Let's go with it for now and we'll see what happens. Because the more I thought about it, the more I was like, well, if anyone wants to tell me that, like, I mean, the cover is so serious on its own. It's like bold. For those just listening, it's like bold, like sans serif font. It's very like I think we really pulled a lot of inspiration from like sort of Ta-Nehisi Coates' design type thing. Like it's a very like literary serious cover. And then adding that little bit of pink over the black letters and over sort of the more sternness of it, I think shows that there's a teeny bit of play in the
Hmm.
text because there
Hmm.
is. It is my wit is acerbic and I am a sassy little fuck. And so, there are moments where it feels a little fuchsia. And also it's like, oh, do you think? Because my insecurity was, well, if it's pink, are people going to think it's not so literary? Because we want it to be seen. It is a very literary. It's an essay collection. It's a very literary book. It's readable, but it's literary. And then I was like, you just thought to yourself, will people take it less seriously if it's pink? Jacob, that was misogyny. That was literally internalized misogyny. So yeah, leave the pink because clearly it made you grow to do this.
Oh, I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah. And it's being released. What's the date again?
August 26th. So very
Okay.
soon. You can
Very soon.
pre-order now anywhere books are sold, but preferably from your local neighborhood bookstore. And there's an audiobook too. So if you love my grating homosexual voice,
You're the narrator?
yeah, I do
Yeah.
the whole thing myself,
Yeah.
which actually like I'm like I love doing audiobooks. It's my favorite because you
Yeah.
get to use your NPR voice.
Yeah.
And I think the book it reads differently than it listens.
Hmm.
Um
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Cool. I'm excited. I'm going to read it. Or I might actually listen to it. But
yeah,
but
listen to it and then I think what happens with a lot of my readers is that they listen to me first and then they buy the book because they want it on their shelf after they listened.
oh, yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, ain't that modernity?
Yeah. 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 Okay. Well, is there anything else that feels important for you to say right now before we wrap up?
I do feel we covered just quite a lot of ground,
Yes.
very densely. This was a chocolate ganache richness of an episode. I'm just so grateful to have this conversation with you. Um, I learned so much and synthesized so much, and it's a real joy when in the process of talking to somebody, you get to grow yourself too. So,
Yeah.
and thank you to
Yes.
everybody who
Yeah.
listened.
Yeah. And thank you for all of your insights. And I love it when I can talk about grief and laugh a little bit too.
Oh,
So
you
I really,
gotta.
I know. So I really appreciate that. And I really love this conversation. So thank you so much for being on.
Thank you for being here with me, Laura Walton, and my incredible guest on Grief on Purpose. Your presence is a gift, and I'm so grateful you're walking this path with us. For more connection and resources, you'll find everything you need in the show description. To my guests, thank you for sharing your person with us today. It is truly an honor to know your story. I'm your host, Laura Walton. Until next time, be kind to yourself and remember you're not alone in your grief. We are here on purpose.